Yeah, well, I mean, I was just saying in the chat that this want has cut across political lines. I mean, as you're saying with the tennis court oath, with Marx and Marxists, but also with Oswald Mosley and various fascist parties as well. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is actually. Like, I am actually curious what the through line is for all of them. Because I mean, on 356, I had a very sincere question to Bauer stating, quote, "For us in Austria, the question is as follows. Will Austria continue to exist as an independent state such that the forces that we have described increase in strength and prove able to transform the old Austria into a multinational federative state? Or will the principle of nationality destroy Austria? Will the old empire disintegrate?" And like the question I sort of derived from that is, even if it did become a multinational federative state, and we see this with the EU, and I think to a certain degree, as we have touched on, we kind of see it with the US. Neither are necessarily that good at negotiating the tensions between the individual states' rights in comparison with like the overarching rights of all the people within this multinational federation. Um, I'm not a super buff on Soviet history, but I bet there were tensions there too. And so I'm just interested in like why is there this deep fascination with the multinational state? And if socialism is the route to communism, which is the abolition of states, that's one of its like main like prescriptions. Then I'm curious about how anybody conceptualizes the multinational state getting to that point,
I think a lot of
and
it
if it's
has to.
possible.
I think a lot of it has to do with just like viewing like this is a seen as a corporate political body at a like higher order, at a qualitatively higher order. And I think like literally it being at that higher order level and like is really what people, because I still like, especially with Bauer, there still is this, and like obviously like everyone here has discussed education, but he has almost a blind faith in education, like this thing called socialist education and free democratic decision making will bring about like this without really quite interrogating the underlying social logic of that higher order sort of like political body like in of itself. Would be maybe another like interesting like proponent and actually a big like part of like Alexander Kojev was a big like he was this weird both liberal but Stalinist kind of bizarre Hegelian mix, and like I think the EU was the realization of like what his like sort of dream would be. And I do think that this is kind of where I think I saw in the Discord Ben being very dismissive of the question of the withering of the state, but I don't think it's a question like worth being totally dismissive of because of this reason. Because what are you going to see is like yeah, like I think if you don't take up the like theory of the withering of the state, then it is Bauer's route of this, and I do think it's a phase to be passed through. But I do think that there's something like lacking in just being like, oh, if we unify at this higher, more general level, things will just be better. And I do think that that's sometimes what's going on here. Now, obviously, he is socialist, and it's not as naive as that. But there are times when I'm hearing him, especially talk about the great virtues of education and democracy. That it does kind of feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that's actually just right after that, and I've been touching on this in like one of my social stratification classes, is that he says, literally directly after that quote on 356, that we must attempt to answer this question by examining the forces that aim to dissolve the multinational state and those that aspire to maintain it. Furthermore, we must attempt to conduct this investigation, and this is like the key part I'm like latching onto, with an impartial scientific objectivity. I think this goes back not only to our conversation about the immortal science, as it were, but also, and I don't think this is like a heretical statement. You can't really do impartial scientific observations or have impartial scientific objectivity when it comes to nation crafting. Only because, like, the way that you get past that in even social sciences, which is where a lot of nation crafting gets conducted, is like the peer review system. Because we all bring in biases, right? Like, impartiality is largely just like a myth that we've all just sort of like taken on. Like, there isn't really an impartial system.
Amusingly, in order to take up that impartial position is to like negate Bauer's own analysis, like in a very real sense. Like, he has this national character.
Yeah.
Bauer is, as an Austrian, as a German as a German Austrian, Bauer is trying to find a way to maintain the contiguous Austro-Hungarian Empire, but for socialism, by eliminating the aristocracy, and by eventually moving past the bourgeois mode of production, but also even implies all the time that it's good and it should not go away, and his biases are very obvious, and I think he even sort of admits it, but it doesn't really doesn't quite directly approach the question either. It's like it's so constant, so commonplace that it's almost like it doesn't even really deserve a mention to him. I mean,
yeah, what do you think of his him talking about pan-Slavism? I don't know if you have opinions on that, Jason, at all, and like especially relative to like Czechs.
I kind of agree with not just Bauer, but the general kind of...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what exactly you said. Sorry.
I kind of agree that pan-Slavism is a retrograde force, but it's also... I agree with Bauer in this... in his... what we talked about last time about how the national question, because it asserts itself, the only thing really to do is to figure out how to respond. And I think that pan-Slavism had proven, especially in the 20th century, to be a very effective unifying force. Yugoslavia, for example.
Yeah.
You can see what happens in the Balkans in the absence of the Yugoslav socialist project. You have the most violent destruction of human life in Europe since the Second World War. But anyways...
well, this is the fear and the bias that Bauer is working with.
Yeah.
And I think is correct is that, like, if the movement towards socialism is happening, and I think at that point in time, I think you can pretty confidently say there's a growing movement, there's a growing socialist movement, there's a growing workers movement. And it does kind of coalesce under the Russian Revolution that happens after this book. But in Bauer's time, you're saying this movement is growing. How are we going to handle these multinational states? Because if we don't handle these multinational states, they're going to collapse into nations, and there's going to be a counter-revolutionary, like international, like national fighting,
right?
That will break worker solidarity. And that's like, I don't know if fear is the right word, but I think that's the bias of Bauer's tendency to say, well, the Austro-Hungarian Empire should continue existing as this formation.
Well, yeah, because it very much happened precisely the way he said it will happen if we don't handle this series of questions, and it did happen precisely that way, and to immense destruction, not just of productive property, but also that too, but also of human life.
Yeah, like looking at the history of the collapse of a lot of multinational states, it doesn't seem to turn out very well.
You can call all the conflicts in Eastern Europe post-Soviet conflicts at this point as nationalism.
The collapse of multinational states, like violently bursting out into these national autonomous movements. I had a quote for this that was interesting. Whatever, I'll try and look for it.
Well, let's start back in. This entire first section was literally just me writing things and then having a question about it. I don't know if this is going to tie in with anything else that we were saying, but the one thing I wanted to like lead into a discussion, which leads us further down, we're on 357 now, is the quote, in the first place, there are entire nations with an interest in the continued existence of the monarchy. This applies directly to all those nations that do not have compatriots in large numbers outside of the monarchy. Thus, it applies in Austria to 5.9 million Czechs, 1.2 million Slovenes, and in Hungary, blah, 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 blah. There is nothing for these nations to gain from the disintegration of the monarchy. Interestingly, I wrote in my notes, curious if there are any parallels to be drawn by historically marginalized nations having some conservative or reactionary tendencies when it comes to maintaining the status quo of a multinational state.